Noah watched her from the corner of the hallway every morning for 15 years, and not once did she miss a step. Black shoes, gray janitor's uniform, gloves tucked in her back pocket like clockwork. Her name tag said, Mrs. Eliza. But no one ever dared ask her last name, like it had been swallowed by time or burned off the fabric. She'd mop the lobby floors of Whitmore and Langley before the city even woke, vanish before the suits rolled in, and return again after dark like a ghost cleaning up after the living. Everyone assumed she was just a relic of the building, another shadow in the gleam of power. But what happened yesterday morning, no one can explain. It started with the sound of her cart squeaking down the executive wing where janitors were never allowed, and ended with the CEO Douglas Carr walking out like his skin didn't fit right, like he was made of paper about to tear. He didn't say a word, just handed security his badge, turned to Mrs. Eliza and whispered something. No one else heard, but Noah did. He was standing too close. It's yours now. I remember. You're probably wondering what the hell that means, and why it matters. But here's the thing. What if I told you that's not even the strangest part? There's a file, buried in the archived drives of the company's oldest server. It doesn't have a name, just a date. December 9th, 1988 tie. The folder has no permissions, no access logs, and when you try to open it, the system freezes for exactly 15 seconds. Then the screen goes black. Noah found it last night. He shouldn't have been in there. He was only trying to delete old email backups before the auditors showed up. But something pulled him in. Not curiosity, fear. He said it felt like standing too close to the edge of a building and suddenly realizing your body wants to jump. Inside that file is a single image, a black and white photo of Mrs. Eliza, standing in front of the Whitmore and Langley building. But the date scrawled on the back says, October 13th, 1972 coup. The building didn't even exist back then. And here's the part you won't believe unless you see it yourself. On the bottom right corner of the photo, barely visible, is a signature in blood red ink. It says, Founder and sole owner, E. Langley. That's when Noah began to dig, and he found a purchase deed, silent partners, proxy names, shell corporations that circle back to an entity called Anointed House LLC, registered in Louisiana, dissolved in 1994. But before it did, it sold exactly one asset, the entire Whitmore and Langley complex. The buyer's name, classified, no human signature, just the same mark from the photo. I know this sounds insane. I know how it feels to hear this, like you've just stumbled into something ancient and breathing, something that doesn't want to be seen. But this isn't the story of a janitor who became a CEO. This is the story of a woman who never left power, who cleaned up after men who thought they ruled, while she watched quietly, remembering. And this morning, just hours ago, something else happened. One of the interns, a girl named Ava, walked past the same hallway where Mrs. Eliza's cart usually sits. But it wasn't there. In its place was a baby stroller. No baby. Just a voice recorder tucked under a blanket. Ava pressed play. What came through wasn't music. It wasn't human. It was a voice deep and trembling with centuries, and it said one name. A name no one in the building had ever spoken aloud before. Ava said it chilled her spine. She whispered it once under her breath before disappearing down the east stairwell. She hasn't been seen since, but her security badge was just found, wedged under Mrs. Eliza's old mop bucket. The name. It wasn't Eliza. Noah stared at the badge for a full minute before picking it up. It was warm. Not like freshly dropped warm, but like it had been held too long, gripped tight by fingers that didn't want to let go. He glanced around the corridor. Empty. Fluorescent lights flickered above, doing that soft hum they always did when no one else was around. But tonight, the sound scraped the inside of his skull like static. He slipped Ava's badge into his pocket and pushed the mop bucket gently with his foot. It rolled 2 inches, then stopped, like it had weight inside it, something heavier than it should be. He didn't look. Not yet. Something in him whispered, "Don't check, not now. Not here." He walked back to his desk, even though his shift had ended an hour ago. even though he didn't remember walking in. His computer was still on, email open, subject line blinking. But it wasn't from IT or payroll or anything work-related. It was from Ava, sent exactly 32 minutes ago. Ooh. Have you ever wondered why no one talks about the 9th floor? That was it. No body text, no attachments, just that sentence. But Whitmore and Langley only had 8 floors. Noah minimized the window, suddenly aware of a buzzing deep in his left ear. At first he thought it was just tinnitus, maybe stress, but then it pulsed irregularly, almost like breath. He pressed a finger against the side of his head and closed his eyes. Behind the buzz was a whisper, just one word buried under layers of static. He leaned closer to the screen, not sure why. The word wasn't clear, but it wasn't in English. Not entirely. More like an echo that didn't belong in any tongue he knew, but still made his body recoil. He ripped off his ID lanyard, tossing it on the desk, and tried to shake the feeling crawling up the back of his neck. And that's when the audio file auto-played. There hadn't been a file before. He swore there hadn't. But now a player window pulsed across his screen. No label, no metadata. Just black waves rising and falling like they were underwater. The sound it played wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. A soft recording of a woman humming, not singing. An old lullaby Noah didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Every note pulled at the corners of something hidden in him, a memory he never formed or a dream he never woke from. And then at the 10-second mark, a male voice cut in. Sharp, urgent, distant, like it was shouting from the other end of a hallway that no longer existed. Don't follow her. She remembers too much. She remembers you. He shut the laptop. Hard. But the humming didn't stop. Noah stood, heartbeat rattling. The hum was coming from inside the building, somewhere above, and now he was sure of something that had only been a feeling before. There was a 9th floor. It wasn't listed on the elevator directory, wasn't in any blueprint, but he remembered distantly, once waking from a dream as a temp worker, years ago and seeing the elevator stop at a floor that had no name. He'd brushed it off back then. He brushes off a lot. His therapist had called it selective repression. Said the brain sometimes closes doors to protect itself from what it doesn't want to face. But what if those doors were being reopened? What if Mrs. Eliza wasn't the secret, but the lock? What if everyone forgot something at the same time? Noah walked toward the elevator and punched the button. As he waited, he felt the building shift not physically but atmospherically, the way a room feels after someone has been crying inside it for hours. The elevator dinged. He stepped in. There was no button for 9, but there was a faint smudged square between 8 and L barely visible, as if it had once been there and someone tried to erase it with time. He reached out, hesitated, touched it. The light didn't blink. But the doors closed anyway. The ride up felt longer than it should have. The elevator made no sound, no movement, like time had bent sideways. And when the doors finally opened, it wasn't to a hallway. It was to a single, unfurnished office. Old dusty, pale green carpet with yellowing stains. Windows sealed shut with newspaper clippings from decades ago. The air smelled like mildew and ash. And in the center of the room stood a man. Or something like a man. He wore a suit 2 sizes too large, skin too tight, hair combed perfectly, over a scalp that didn't seem to have follicles. His name tag, Whitmore Internal Compliance, was upside down. But his face was familiar. Not in the "I've seen you before" way. In the "I've seen you in my nightmares for years but never knew you were real" way. "Mr. Harper," the man said, as if correcting a decades-old record. "We need to talk about the original agreement." Noah froze. No one here knew his full name, not even HR. "You have the wrong person," he said, but his voice cracked halfway through. Because as he looked around the office, his eyes settled on the only object inside. An old rotary phone mounted on the far wall. It was ringing. The man tilted his head. "If you don't remember signing it, that's all right. Most of you don't." "But you did, in 1999 during the drill." "There was no drill in '99, Noah muttered. "I wasn't even..." But his words fell apart as the ringing stopped. He hadn't picked it up. No one had. And yet the receiver slowly lifted off its cradle, hanging in the air like it was being held by something invisible. Then a voice came through, fragile and aged. "Noah, sweetheart, you don't need to be afraid. You came back just like you said you would." It was his mother's voice. Except she died in 2005. He staggered back. "What the hell is this?" The man in the suit smiled gently, like a priest waiting for confession. "Some truths are only visible after the third remembering. You're only on your second. But it's okay. We're almost through." And that's when the lights flickered, then cut. When they returned, Noah was alone. Office empty, elevator gone. No door, no exit. Just those goddamn clippings on the window. Except now they weren't newspapers. They were personnel files. His face. Ava's, Eliza's, even Douglas Carr. But each one was marked with a red stamp across the bottom. Observer removed. Event loop reset. Noah started ripping them down, panicked. Behind the clippings was just concrete. No glass, no outside world, just wall. Sealed. And then, behind him, a voice. Softer this time. Female. Gentle. "I was never cleaning," she whispered. "I was watching the ones who forgot." He turned. Mrs. Eliza stood by the old phone, holding it now, dressed not in janitor's clothes, but a black suit with the Whitmore and Langley crest on the breast pocket. Only now the crest read something. Different. Anointed House, Return Division. Her eyes were full of sadness, not malice, not rage, just tired knowing. She stepped forward and touched Noah's cheek. "You saw something you weren't supposed to. You remembered. That's rare." "I don't understand," he croaked. "Why me?" She looked down at her gloved hands, slowly removed one. Underneath, not skin, but burned parchment. Words, etched in ink he couldn't read, crawling up her arm like veins. "Because you never really left," she said. "You were the first, the prototype, the one we modeled the others after. The loop began with you." Noah backed away, trembling. "This isn't real. This is some kind of psychotic break. I've been overworked, I haven't slept." A new voice echoed from the corner. Ava. She was crouched there, dirty, shaking, but alive. "Noah," she whispered. "You don't get it. None of this is real. It's a memory you're trapped inside. You and me, we're not supposed to be here. We're ghosts of what they erased." But Mrs. Eliza only smiled. That's one version. And then the phone rang again. This time Noah reached for it. But before he could answer, the room changed. The walls collapsed into ash. Files turned into birds. The floor peeled away like old film strip. And everything reset. Back at his desk. Monday morning, janitor cart rolling down the hall, and an email blinking on his screen from Ava. "Do you ever feel like we're being watched? By something that used to be us?" Noah leaned back, sweat collecting under his collar. And then he heard, again, the lullaby playing softly, but this time, coming from inside his own mouth. Noah woke up on the cold floor of the office building's basement, the taste of rust and mildew sharp in his mouth. And for the first time in what felt like weeks, no, maybe years, he thought he knew what was happening. The air was heavy but steady. The hum in his ears was gone. The elevator was just an elevator again. The badge in his pocket wasn't burning. Ava was safe, or at least somewhere beyond this nightmare. The files marked Observer removed were now just forgotten papers left to rot. He'd traced the company's ownership back to a shell corporation named Anointed House LLC, dissolved years ago, and uncovered falsified documents claiming Mrs. Eliza had been the sole owner all along. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, behind layers of forged contracts and erased histories. Noah had stumbled into a hidden truth no one wanted uncovered, he told himself. The mystery uncovered. But as he stared at the screen of his laptop, which now calmly displayed an official email from Whitmore and Langley's legal department, something in his gut twisted. The email contained the final piece, a scanned signature, From Eliza Langley herself, dated 19 years ago, long after Mrs. Eliza had been just the janitor. He exhaled slowly. The documents lined up. The company was hers all along. She'd never left the shadows, never truly vanished. She'd been watching, waiting to reclaim what was hers. That explained everything. Carr's sudden resignation, the whispers no one else heard, Ava's disappearance. Noah felt the weight of revelation press down on him, but for once, it was a heavy that brought relief rather than dread. The pieces fit. The memory glitches, the missing time, the unexplained audio distortions were just cracks in the corporate facade, artifacts of years of obfuscation. He wasn't crazy. They lied to him. And yet, as he shut his laptop and stood to leave the dim break room where he had pieced it all together, the phone in the corner, an old rotary phone from the company's forgotten archives, began to ring. The shrill sound sliced through the quiet, a jarring intrusion that made his skin crawl. He wanted to ignore it, but something compelled him forward, hands trembling as he lifted the receiver. The voice on the other end was a whisper, soaked in static and something darker. "Remember the fire?" The line went dead. The words echoed, inside him like an ancient bell tolling in a forgotten church. The fire. What fire? His mind scrambled through fractured memories, half-forgotten images flickering behind his eyes. The smoke, the screams, the faces melting into ash. It was a nightmare he'd buried deep, a memory glitch his brain had tried to lock away. Noah's hands shook as the room around him blurred, the walls breathing in and out with a slow, sinister rhythm. He remembered now. Not from news or history books, but as if the memory was slamming back into his mind from a locked vault he never knew existed. The fire at the Whitmore and Langley headquarters 23 years ago. The building that burned to the ground, taking with it the original owners, employees, and all records. The official cause was electrical failure, an accident. But the truth was darker. Rumors spoke of something inside the building, something alive and hungry, watching as the flames devoured. Flesh and steel alike. Survivors spoke of hearing whispers behind the roar of fire, shadows moving in ways no smoke should allow. Most dismissed these accounts as trauma-induced hallucinations. But Noah was beginning to think those survivors weren't crazy. They were, witnesses to something they were never supposed to see. He glanced at the peeling paint of the basement walls, and then at his own reflection in the cracked glass of a forgotten window. There was a flicker, just a flash in his eyes, like something behind them moved. A watcher, an observer who had been with him since the beginning, invisible, but never absent. Noah felt a chill that wasn't from the damp air or the cold floor, but from a presence so old it bent time and memory itself. The danger wasn't just outside this room, it was inside his mind, inside his very soul. And then came the twist, a detail so small, so seemingly insignificant, that it could have been overlooked in a million other versions of this story. But Noah caught it in the corner of the email. Header. The sender's address was misspelled. Not iWhitmoreLangley.com, but uwhitmore1angley.com, with a subtle but deliberate substitution of the letter LL with the number 1. The domain didn't exist. The email was fake. The documents were forged. The signature was a digital ghost. Noah's relief shattered. The foundation of his discovery crumbled beneath him like ash. If the last piece of the puzzle was a lie, then what was real? The mystery wasn't solved. It had only deepened. And worse, he realized the phone call, the voice, the memory of the fire. They hadn't been warnings. They were bait. Lures in a psychological trap designed to unravel him, to pull him back under when he thought he was close to escape. He sank, back into his chair, breath shallow, heart hammering like it was trying to escape a cage. The room grew colder. The walls seemed to close in. He was alone, but not alone. He was watched, always watched. The truth behind what no one tells you was that some stories don't want to be told. Some memories are edited before they reach your consciousness. You're not crazy. They lied to you. Noah reached for his phone, wanting to call someone, anyone, to anchor himself to a reality that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. But the screen was blank. And then, slowly, letters began to appear, typed out one by one with no fingers pressing keys. You never left the building. The fire is still burning. The message dissolved into static, and the room tilted. As Noah's vision blurred, he realized he wasn't sure anymore if he was the observer or the observed, if he was the protagonist or the ghost, and in that moment, everything he'd seen, heard, and remembered demanded to be rewatched, rewritten, re-understood, because the nightmare was only beginning. Noah's breath caught in the hollow of his chest as the message on his phone faded into nothing but static. Yet the dread it seeded took root deeper than any ghost story whispered on cold nights. He was not alone in this labyrinth of erased memories and shifting realities. Somewhere beyond the peeling walls and humming fluorescent lights of Whitmore and Langley's forgotten basement, others were awake. Others who saw the same shadows stretching out behind their eyelids, who heard the same low whispers sliding under the edges of their consciousness, like secret signals sent across invisible wires. And those others weren't just survivors or victims. They were watchers, waiting in silence, watching him watch. It began with a flicker on his laptop screen, an unassuming folder named simply Echoes that had never been there before. When he opened it, a series of encrypted files revealed themselves, each labeled with dates that made his head spin. Years when he wasn't even supposed to be awake. Time periods where his own memories had vanished like mist. The files contained nothing outright. No pictures, no videos, but instead patterns. Symbols that seemed random at first glance, jagged lines intersecting in complex fractal shapes that pulsed faintly with a hidden light, as if they were breathing. In code, they resembled no alphabet he recognized, yet somewhere in the hollows of his mind a flicker of recognition bloomed. A shared dream? A message written in the language of the forgotten? Then came the messages, cryptic, almost mocking, sent through channels he barely used. A text appearing mid-sleep. You were right all along. But the truth is, a mirror shattered. A voicemail composed of distant static and a child's voice whispering a name no one had said aloud in decades. A flicker on the security cameras, grainy footage from 20 years ago. Found footage no one outside a handful had ever seen, showing a shadowy figure pacing those same corridors at the moment the fire erupted. It was impossible to know if the figure was a man or a woman, alive or dead, but the footage wasn't in the official archives. It was what the government never released, locked away in secrets and silences. The deeper Noah dove, the more the walls between his own reality and those of these unknown others blurred, until he couldn't tell if his thoughts were his own or echoes bouncing from minds linked invisibly across time and space. The symbols kept appearing, tattoos etched on arms and blurry photos sent anonymously, graffiti scrawled on walls of abandoned buildings he'd never seen, only heard about in whispers between people who were afraid to speak their truth aloud. Each symbol a key, each key a question. Who controls the memories we keep? Who decides what is erased? And most terrifying, who watches when we believe ourselves alone? Into this swirl of fractured consciousness came a new voice. Unlike the others, steady, calm, almost kind, a third perspective emerging from the shadows, someone or something that claimed to be the only one telling the truth. It called itself the Observer, a presence threaded through the fabric of the conspiracy, yet outside it. This voice spoke, through subtle cracks in static-filled videos, through messages hidden in the metadata of corrupted files, urging Noah and the others to question the nature of identity itself, to understand that what they thought was self was perhaps a construct designed to keep them compliant, to keep the fire burning quietly beneath the surface of all they knew. The mind is a fortress and a prison, the Observer's message said. They build the walls you believe to be yours, but the architects walk among you, silent and unseen. Memory is the currency of control, and your fragmented selves are the product of their design. It didn't say who they were, only that The Watchers had been here since before the fire, before the company, before any of the names Noah had ever known. The Watchers weren't just watching him. They watched all of them, tethered by invisible strings of fear and forgotten history. Noah's grip tightened on the worn armrest of his chair as realization seeped through him like cold oil. The conspiracy wasn't just a series of corporate deceptions or erased ownership records. It was a deep, living thing, an atmospheric force wrapping itself around every memory and every moment, manipulating the very essence of who he thought he was. The feeling wasn't just paranoia. It was proof of something more profound and terrifying, that the person looking back at him in the cracked window was both himself and not himself, a fragment in a greater puzzle that had been assembling all along, the shared dreams, the fragmented messages, the symbols bleeding from the margins of reality. It was an invitation and a warning, all at once. He wasn't just uncovering a story. He was becoming part of it, and the Watchers had noticed. Noah's phone vibrated again, though the screen remained black. Then, slowly, letters began to appear, not typed, but emerging from the void like smoke, curling around a flame. "Look closer. The truth is in the cracks you hide from yourself." He glanced around the room, shadows lengthening, the hum returning, thick and suffocating, like the building itself was breathing in rhythm with his rising panic. Somewhere beyond his senses, the others were watching too, waiting for their next move in a game with no clear rules or end. And somewhere, deep in the tangled web of memories and half-remembered fears, Noah knew that what he thought was the end was only the beginning. The Watchers weren't just in the building or in the past. They were in his mind, in every thought he'd ever had, pulling strings with a precision so intimate it was as if they had always been inside him. The room seemed to pulse, the symbols in the files glowing faintly in the dark. The message repeated, in a low whisper carried by the cold air around him. "You were right all along, but knowing the truth is only the first step. What comes next is what they never told you." Noah's hands shook as he stared into the flickering shadows, the line between watcher and watched dissolving like mist in the dawn, and the truth waiting just beyond reach, hidden in the cracks of a memory no one wanted recovered. Noah sat, alone in the quiet of the abandoned office, the cold air wrapping around him like a shroud, pressing heavy against his ribs, making every breath a deliberate act of will. The symbols, the messages, the whispers, they weren't just clues or cryptic breadcrumbs leading him somewhere. They were a mirror reflecting something far more raw and brutal. The fragility of memory, the weight of identity, and the unbearable loneliness stitched into the human soul. It wasn't just about uncovering what had happened to Mrs. Eliza, to Ava, to the company. It was about why it all unfolded beneath the surface of normalcy, beneath the masks everyone wore. The mystery had shifted. The question was no longer what happened, but why anyone needed to erase their own story in the first place. The Watchers, the forgotten files, the fractured memories, they weren't enemies or villains in the traditional sense. They were the unbearable silence of trauma, the desperate need to hide from pain so profound that forgetting was the only escape. Noah felt it seeping into his bones now, a cold truth that shattered his understanding of control. Maybe the fire wasn't just a disaster but a reckoning. Maybe the missing pieces weren't lost, but locked away to protect something even darker. The vulnerability of being human, the terror of facing what lurks beneath the surface of ourselves when no one else is watching. In that moment, a wave of exhaustion crashed over him, the fight to unravel the story suddenly feeling like a fight against himself. The phone buzzed again, and he let it ring out, knowing that every message, every whisper was a test, a choice between holding on to the illusion of control or surrendering to the chaos beneath. Then came the confession, a voice, fragile, trembling, breaking through the static. "Noah," it said, soft as a breath, "this isn't just your story, it's all of ours. I hid it because I was afraid of what truth could do if it was set free. But you You have to decide if you want to be saved or destroyed by it. The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, threatening to snap. For the first time, Noah understood that the Watchers weren't just outside forces, but pieces of his own fractured self, parts of a psyche battered by loss, fear, and denial. The choice was his alone: to step into the light of truth, risking everything he thought he knew, or to retreat into the shadowed safety of oblivion, where the fire never needed to be faced. The room around him blurred, shadows folding into memories, the line between past and present dissolving. He was waking up from a dream he hadn't realized he was trapped in. A dream spun from silence and secrets, from the lies we tell ourselves to survive. And with that awakening came the raw ache of vulnerability, the searing loneliness of knowing that some truths don't come with answers, only more questions. Noah's hand hovered over the phone as the final message appeared. No words, just a symbol pulsing with faint light. He knew this was no longer about uncovering a story. It was about embracing the unbearable complexity of what it meant to be human. The pain, the fear, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth could be a kind of salvation. As he finally made his choice, the room grew still, the shadows settling like dust after a storm. The Watchers receded. Not defeated, but waiting, knowing the story was far from over. And in the quiet, the last line lingered, drifting through the darkness like a whispered promise. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.